Getting their attention and recruiting their interest through offering choice and connectedness to real life. What I would do here is have students close their eyes and imagine their best day ever. What would this look like? Have students share out examples, and I would chart them on the board, making sure to include everyone's thoughts. Examples could include going to the movies or an amusement park, visiting the beach, lunch at their favorite restaurant, building a fort with friends, visiting a national park, riding bikes on the Capitol Crescent Trail, going to the monuments for a picnic, or watching a professional soccer game. Then I would ask students, what if you had 7 hours? Imagine an entire school day, or maybe imagine 3.5 hours, half of a day, to do whatever you wanted during your best day ever. How would you know what you could do? How would you know what would fit? At this time, I'd have students turn and talk, which would hopefully already have been established with turning and talk partners, about how they would pick and how they would determine what would work into their schedule. At this time, it would probably be appropriate to name and define elapsed time as elapsed time is simply the amount of time that passes from the beginning of an event to its end. And then I'd go back to those real-life examples that they're shared out and discuss some of the elapsed time for a handful of the events. This would connect to UDL Principal Provide Multiple Means of Engagement, Guideline 7, Provide Options for Recruiting Interest, and Checkpoints 7.1, Individual Choice, and 7.2, Relevance, as well as 7.3, Minimize Threats and Distractions, by providing a classroom where all can share, all thoughts are valued and documented, everyone is engaged in the turn and talk with their established partner, and really everyone is just feeling like a part of the community, and they're able to connect it to their real life, which has them excited, it's authentic, it's relevant, it's going to be things that they value, but also they'll be able to see that their choices and what they're thinking about might be different, and that that's okay. Or maybe they're realizing that they have something in common with a peer that they didn't think they would be. Accessibility through customized information. So different students will require information to be displayed in different ways. Once students have chosen who they will work with, or if they want to work independently, the following would be available. Graphic organizers to organize activities, including a start time, an end time, and a section on a graphic organizer for elapsed time. The graphic organizer options could include a 3.5-hour planning window or a 7-hour planning window. So again, that's including some choice as well as some scaffolding on the back end. There'd be computer access to research elapsed time of specific activities. For example, if they wanted to find a movie time for Toy Story 4, they'd be able to look that up, and as well as print access as needed. Anchor charts showing conversions between seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, and months would also be included through learning that would occur through mini lessons in the class, and that would be available. Analog clocks, such as the yellow Judy clocks, would be in the classroom for all students to help them determine elapsed time, as well as number lines that they could write on with dry erase markers, or they could create them in their math notebook to also solve elapsed time. So this connects to UDL Principal Provide Multiple Means of Representation, Guideline 1, Provide Options for Perception and Checkpoints 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3, which customize how information is displayed, both auditory and visually. Furthermore, anchor charts and manipulatives connect to Guideline 2, Provide Options for Language and Symbols, Checkpoints 2.1, 2.3, and 2.5. They will also support and reinforce Guideline 3, Provide Options for Comprehension, and Checkpoints 3.1, Background Knowledge, 3.2, Relationships Between Time, and 3.3, there'd be Guiding Process and Visualization. The anchor charts would be able to highlight patterns between numbers and time. They would also highlight critical features and big ideas that the students could refer back to. and these would be up in the classroom in a place where they would all be able to see. Sustained effort through relevance. And making it relevant is important. They need to understand why what they're doing matters, and how is this going to help them later on. I had a 5th grade student this year that anytime we would start a new skill and I would share the learning objective, before the words could even come out of my mouth, or before I could even ask them how it connected to the real life or where they could use this outside of math class, she would always raise her hand and ask that question. Why do we need to know this? But it was always great. It sparked a wonderful conversation, and it showed that kids really do want to understand the relevance. So I think it's important to build in opportunities for collaboration. Working with a partner would be an option in this activity. There would be plenty of peer and teacher feedback, a self-reflection and goal-setting piece, and I would hope for some cross-grade level connections, or even some sharing with other students in the same grade that might not be in the same class. So this connects to UDL Principle 8, provide options for sustaining effort and persistence. Checkpoints 8.3, fostering collaboration and community. So this would be how they're choosing to work with or without a partner. But even if they're working independently, encouraging that they're checking in with peers and receiving meaningful feedback, that I would scaffold with some sentence strips or cards that they would be able to have when they met with a partner to understand how to give compliments, ask clarifying questions, and provide feedback. Also, checkpoint 8.4, which is feedback from teachers, and I would do that through small group conferences, one-on-one conferences, or a strategy group, or checking in with the whole group as needed. To build more on that, it's important to remember to scaffold understanding to make it meaningful. So I would clarify and scaffold understanding by, like I said, pulling small groups, having math conferences to clarify examples of elapsed time and share strategies. This is when I could also teach using a number line for students that it would benefit, or the algorithm, or practice with manipulatives, giving feedback to workers and partnerships often, both through conferences. Also, sometimes I find it helpful to summarize what we talked about in a conference on a sticky note, and then keeping those sticky notes in their notebooks so they're constantly referring back to that as we talk about meeting our learning goal and assessing ourselves and reflecting, that they know it's clear what they're working on. They know what their goals are. And then also through the use of Google Classroom, being able to comment right on their work, on their brainstorming, on their project, and giving them feedback there that they can actually mark when they've resolved it, so that that learner accountability is high. Also, I could clarify and scaffold understanding through using a math word wall and the same anchor charts that I talked about earlier. So vocabulary such as seconds, minutes, hours, days, week, month, elapsed time, AM, PM, minute hand, second hand, hour hand, phrases like 10 till or half past might be on a word wall, and also labeled throughout the classroom. So labeling these things on a clock, and again, making those explicit connections to things that they already know, like skip counting and fractions, and having those manipulatives accessible at all times. Another tool that I use a lot and would use in this case are the sentence strips. Sentence strips are so powerful for our students when they can't find the right words, but they want to be able to talk to someone about math. So sentence strips for explaining strategies, sentence strips for if they can't think of how to ask a question, whether to their peer or to me, sentence strips for organizing their presentation of their work, and sentence strips for giving feedback. Something else to make it meaningful would be having the rubric ahead of time, knowing how I'm planning on assessing the students based on their specific learning path and learning goals. So the expectations are very clear, and they're not left wondering what they'll be working on. So this connects to the UDL Principle 1, provide options for perception and checkpoints 1.1 offer ways of customizing the display of information. So those examples were using word walls, vocabulary labels, sentence strips, and that also connects to UDL Principle 2, provide options for language and symbols, which can be seen through checkpoint 2.1 and 2.3. 2.1, clarify vocabulary and symbols, and 2.3, support decoding of text, mathematical notation, and symbols. It's like a giant web. Everything and so many things are connected in different places, which really shows the power of UDL and learning as a whole. Students have a variety of access to online tools, manipulatives, classroom resources, and peer-to-peer collaboration, which mirrors UDL Principle 4, providing options for physical action, where students can utilize various methods for navigation, like checkpoint 4.1, and also optimize their access 4.2. Google Classroom as a scaffold is an example of checkpoint 5.1, use media as communication, and referring to a rubric supports UDL Principle 9, provide options for self-regulation. Making connections and highlighting big ideas are huge when we are teaching learners new ideas and having them explore new concepts through inquiry. Connecting to what they already know, I would be able to highlight some things that I've already shared, but I'll go over them quickly. Patterns, how to think critically about time and the relationship between time, skip counting around the clock, fractions, time relationship between morning and evening, elapsed time throughout the school day but also on the weekends, conversions, relationships between the movement on the clock, which would also connect to cause and effect. So we're seeing a little cross-curricular connection, and really getting them to think about, why is measuring time important? Who else is this helpful for other than people? When else do we really use time, and what did we do before we had clocks to tell time? So all of this connects to UDL Principle 3, provide options for comprehension, and all of the checkpoints that go along with it. I'm looking through, here we go. So for comprehension, they are activating and supplying background knowledge by thinking about what they already know. They're highlighting patterns between mathematical concepts, but also thinking about the big idea of time and the relationship on a clock. This would guide information through processing and visualization, actually using a clock, and then maximize transfer and generalization as well. Then students will get the opportunity to apply it, apply their understanding, apply the depth of their knowledge with many options. So some different project-based learning options, or options that could be used to assess, would be having that choice to pick between the 3.5 or 7 hour time frame for their assessment. They would get choice with the variety of activities they would pick, and then also how they are displaying that. Are they creating a poster? Are they just using words and explaining what they would do? Using technology, creating a skit, using math manipulatives, numbers, text, video, audio recording, or actually giving a lesson to their peers. They have choice on how they work, both through either independent or with a partner, and a lot of options for expression and communication. There would be many opportunities to practice, both in a small group, independently, through teacher check-ins, and all of this connects to UDL Principle 5, expression and communication, as well as the checkpoint 5.1, which says using multiple media for communication as a choice, tools for construction and composition, 5.2, kind of giving them options, but also letting them come up with their own unique ideas. And also 5.3, build fluencies with graduated levels of support for practice and performance. So the different option to pick 3.5 hours or 7 hours, as well as kind of a gradual release for those who need it of teacher or peer support.